for the rabbi to come back.
Okay.
I'm disappointed that we didn't record the Megillah reading later.
The reading was recorded.
It's there. It's on the YouTube channel.
Well, I asked and Rabbi said no.
You asked about the puppet show.
The puppet show was terrific. It should have been recorded.
That didn't get. It was. They tried, but
That's what you asked about. The
Yes.
Megillah reading was recorded.
We tried to record everything, but Lily had connection issues, and so it was unintentional.
The puppet show was terrific.
Thank you. So we're on chapter 2, and we're going to be moving on to the third Mishnah. And this Mishnah is a continuation of sayings, teachings by Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. We had a lengthy Mishnah, a lengthy set of teachings in the previous Mishnah that we looked at, where he talks about public service, and he talks about the importance of combining Torah study with worldly matters and worldly concerns, and even a trade, and all of that was last time. And now we have in Mishnah 3 no words of introduction. It just goes straight into what he says. So who's going to give us? I would like to go first with the kind of pretty much the consensus type of translate. Oh, more people are coming in. Hold on a second. Because I didn't put the ping thing. Let's start with the mostly consensus translation. And do we have somebody here who has the Rami Shapiro translation? Not
the regular one.
Not yet, right? You have the consensus one. So
Yep.
Geraldine will read that one, and we're just going to have to be creative ourselves and channel Rabbi Shapiro's approach. Perhaps we can make up something. Okay, Geraldine, go.
This was a favorite teaching of another teaching of Rabban Gamliel. Be wary of the authorities.
Okay, just another editorial. The words another teaching of Rabban Gamliel is not in the text. That's the editorial helpful comment. Okay,
Right.
Here we go. Be
wary of the authorities. They do not befriend anyone unless it serves their own needs. They appear as friends when it is to their advantage, but do not stand by a person in his hour of need.
Okay. So a very grim warning. Hevu zehirim barashut.
I have a
Be very, very careful about the authorities, right? Yes.
my translation's a bit different, even though I think Geraldine and I usually have some more traditional ones. Be ye guarded in your relations with the ruling power, for they who exercise it draw no man near to them except for their own interests, appearing as friends when it is to their own advantage. They stand not by a man in the hour of his need.
Okay. I think that there are some words that are different. I'm not so sure that we can see any big gigantic difference in the meaning between those two translations. So in our own words, what is Rabban Gamliel warning us about? Jen.
Well, actually, I just had a question. It seems like, are we talking about the people in power in a nation or city, state, or whatever overall, or like the people, the rabbis in charge of your community? I feel like there's a big difference there.
Okay, so good. You're asking an excellent question. When he says the authorities, who's he talking about? And we could add another question to that. Who's he talking to? Right? Who exactly is he addressing his warning to? Yeah, Audrey.
I think it's the Romans, according to this book that we have here by Yitz Greenberg. And, in that context, it's an occupying power. And I think he's talking to the public that he represents.
Right. So that's one very, very reasonable and commonly adopted explanation. It makes tremendous sense. The context is that Rabban Gamliel is the son of Rabbi Yehuda, the patriarch. He himself has become the patriarch. He is the leader of the Jewish community, but the Jewish community is a community that is under the thumb of the Romans. And he is, to a certain extent, to go back to Purim, he's a puppet of the Roman authorities. All of his power is actually produced by the fact that the Romans have installed him as the official representative of the Jewish community. So yes, rabbis exist at this point, and rabbis are trying to organize the Jewish community and trying to take care of things and lead the community to preserve the Jewish way of life. We've had also stories of martyrdom where the Romans have not been hospitable, but when the Romans leave us to be the custodians of our own traditions, it's still at their behest, it's still at their pleasure. And that's a little bit of what this, pretty much straightforward reading would say. Rabban Gamliel, who should know better than Rabban Gamliel about what it means to deal with the authorities? He has to deal with the authorities every day. He has to deal with the Roman procurator and with the whatever the powers that be in the occupying empire. He has to make all the arrangements. He has to have the meetings with them. He has to get the permission to do the X, Y, or Z, or find out what he can't do, and find out what are the new things, what kind of taxes are being done, and what kind of, who's, all kinds of stuff, property issues, land issues. So he's dealing with the authorities all the time. The authorities being the people who have power over him. So of course there's a kind of a hierarchy. Yes, Rabban Gamliel supposedly has power over the level of society that he's in charge of, but he's got somebody over him as well. And he may be saying, be very careful. If you want to get involved in Roman politics, watch it. Have no illusions. Have no illusions. This is we are just small fry in their own program and set of priorities, and they'll be nice to us when it's in their interest to be nice to us, and they'll forget about us when we need them to help us if it's not in their interest. John.
It also seems more general than that, because he could have said, our occupiers, or he could have used something a little more directed to the Romans rather than just authorities. I mean, to me, this is the wisdom in this is it's the nature of politics, for good or for ill.
Right.
People
Well,
pretend
so
to be a friend until you really need them, and then it's all about self-interest. Politics is about
right. So we're starting with this kind of very clear context for what he's saying. But you're right. That's why it's available for more than one understanding. I just want to make a point about his own choice of language. He's not getting on a soapbox and saying those occupying Romans, watch them, they're completely morally corrupt and so on. Guess what? He wouldn't be the patriarch for very much longer. So when he uses that kind of general terminology, he is to a certain extent constrained by the fact that he is under somebody else's authority, and he has to be very careful about the way that he formulates his teachings. Otherwise, he gets to be considered a revolutionary, a provocateur. He could get crucified or something like that. That happened to some people. So and not just one famous person. So this is the first step of understanding what he's saying. But you're right. There is a general kind of wisdom here that makes this statement not just a curious statement of a particular, moment in history. It has much more validity to it. So if that would be the case, how would we expand it? What would we say to take this lesson and make it more real for us. Sarita.
So I think it's interesting because one, it's so timely. I mean, some of the other Mishnahs we seemed like what they're talking about, is a struggle to broaden them and to make them relevant for us today. But this is like so continuously relevant. It seems to me it's a cautionary tale about too closely aligning yourself and letting yourself be swayed by people, in power.
I'm sorry, I froze. I mean, you froze, but that means that my computer lost you for a second. So say it one more time, please.
I think that this is a cautionary tale about sort of being guided and aligning yourself too closely with someone or people in power, because that can be very very transitory, and you can easily be abandoned when you're no longer sort of necessary to the other person and such. So I think that really sort of being clear-eyed and evaluating the people in power. Are they in power because they want to do good, or are they in power because they're self-serving? And I think it's sort of, it's a way, it's a take off the rose-colored glasses kind of Mishnah.
Right. So remember, and we'll come back to anybody who wants to talk in a second. Remember that the previous Mishnah gives us instruction about serving the community honestly, with integrity, for the sake of the community, for the sake of God. So Rabbi Gamliel can conceive of public officials with a sense of values and a sense of dedication to the common good. That's all possible, right? Nevertheless, this very brutal warning is very clear-eyed and very, very much saying, I'm not a Pollyanna here. I know exactly what power is all about. Yeah, John.
So when I was, what's interesting to me is there's a way to read it that's not so cynical. It's just to know that these politicians act out of self-interest. When I was young in college and undergraduate school, I was part of in New Mexico, I was part of a team that did lobbying, and we met with the senator and the Congress, 2 senators and congressmen and the governor even. And I was the very junior member of this, didn't really say anything, but the team leader said, listen, the point is we're not here to convince them it's the right thing to do. That's a big mistake. We're here to convince them that it's in their interest to do this thing. So that's sort of, I think, to me, that's what this is getting at.
Right. So yeah, no, I wasn't trying to say that this was cynical at all. It was very real.
No, I'm resisting my own impulse to read it cynically. Yeah, they're all a bunch of.
That's San Diego. It's so hard to get it out of your system, I'm telling you. But yeah, I think that's why that word zihirin, be cautious, be aware, right? Don't lose perspective here. He's not saying, as we have in other places, watch out for the authorities. They'll screw you, right? That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is be careful with the authorities, right? It means, we're not going to go to the authorities to get something done if we can possibly advocate for it, and they have the power to make something better. Of course we will, but watch out about what your perspective in the end is really all about. And that organizer that you were mentioning, John, had it exactly right. To say the obvious, what we saw and have seen in this country over the last bunch of years has been a process of the losing of this kind of caution by tons and tons and tons of people, not just the hoi polloi, but by people who consider themselves very sophisticated and have all kinds of perspectives about what's good for society and what's not good for society, who think that they can manipulate and use the people in power for their own interest, for their agenda, and then of course get sucked in to just being puppets of that powerful regime. When Trump was not elected yet back in 2016, there were all kinds of warnings by people who said, do not make the mistake of thinking this guy is easy to manipulate and you can get whatever you want from him and you can ride on his success for your good. No, they made that mistake in Germany before the Second World War. They thought that the guy in Germany who they made chancellor was a pushover, and instead we had horror and death and catastrophe. And don't underestimate who you're playing with. So it's not just that you can be wrong. What happened is, as we see to this very moment, is that in the end, that person, instead of being a buffoon or in your eyes, or a tool for your own manipulation, that person becomes God. That person becomes an idol. That person becomes an icon. And all of your care and caution and values go down the tubes. And then all of your activity is all for the sake of paying obeisance to this guy who you put in power and you thought was just a clown. So today we see the tragedy in America of half the country completely enthrall to a psychopath. So a sociopath, not a psychopath. So it's people who are not careful about what power can do, about what power can is all about. That would be another way of looking at it. I think there's another way to look at it. And I want to just again open up if somebody has comments right now. Anybody else want to add to this or bring us into another direction? Does anybody want to channel Rabbi Shapiro and see if they can come up with a different translation here? Okay, Adam.
Well, I don't, I'm not going to try to channel Reb Shapiro, but I almost, I have a somewhat more cynical take on this.
Oh, now that John has left, then now you feel that you can say it. Okay, I'm going to tell him what you're going to say. Go ahead.
It depends on who I suppose is the intended audience.
Okay, John, listen to this. This is cynical.
This one way to look at this is, or one way to understand this message is, hey, folks, you need me to deal with the ruling authorities because I know what they're like and I know their tricks. You don't want to deal directly with them. You need me. Because they'll, if you try to deal with them, they'll be very friendly to you, but they do not have your interests at heart. You got to trust me to be the interlocutor for this community.
Boy, that really is cynical.
That's
good for you. Wow. All right. Anybody else? Yeah, Nick.
Well, it's kind of a negative.
You have to talk more to the mic. It's hard to see. It's hard to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Not so well.
I can hear him. He's talking loud.
I can hear you, Audrey. I can hear you. I can't hear Nick.
Okay.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. I think this certainly this thing makes sense. I mean, if we're reading this in the 1970s, we'd all go, yeah, right? I mean, this was a classic thing. Don't trust the authorities. But I also think that this could.
And that was anybody over 30. Remember that? Oh my God.
But I don't think that this is. I mean, I think this is something that also could be used by the ultra-Orthodox to justify the position of insularity. We can't trust anybody, and I wonder if some use it to justify that.
Well, my perception of what's going on in the ultra-Orthodox community is it's not so much not trusting. They don't trust anybody but themselves. Correct. They don't trust anybody but themselves, and they resent the fact that other people have authority over them. So that's true. But I think it's people that are engaged with authority, which they yes, they did it in a very transactional way. As far as they were concerned, the way that you survive is you stay under the radar. You pay your bribes where you have to pay your bribes. You sell your votes to whoever it is that promises you to take care of your limited concerns, and then you don't care about anything else that happens in society as long as you are left alone to do your thing. So yes, that's been the modus vivendi for the ultra-Orthodox for generations. Yes. And when it gets more complicated is when power starts getting more distributed. When a community has absolutely no power and their entire concern is, how are we going to survive? What do we need to do in order to survive? Then you have one kind of policy decisions to make vis-a-vis the authorities. But when you start participating in power and you start actually taking part in making policy, that puts a whole different complexion on the situation. And then your responsibility is no longer only for yourself. And that's, for instance, in Israel today, that's the tragedy of the moral collapse in Israel today, where people will have it both ways. They still function as if they're completely not responsible for the rest of society, and yet they dictate to the rest of society. Unfortunately, that's something of what's happening in America today also. Sarita.
So I think, just to follow up on what Nick said, I think that goes back to who do you think the ruling power or authorities are? So it seems that in the Haredi community, if this is interpreted as the sort of the secular authorities outside of our community, don't trust them, right? But if they take this to mean, but don't apply this to our own leaders, who of course are always working on our behalf. So I think taking this too narrowly and thinking that it always applies to ruling powers outside of your group, I think could be a serious issue.
So I think that, and I don't want to get, we are dealing with that situation in our conversation. What complicates the situation for the ultra-Orthodox is that because things have gotten mixed in together, their usual previous easy distinction between our religious authorities are pure, they have complete honesty and integrity and do everything for the sake of heaven and for the sake of the Jewish people. It's the politicians that are corrupt and out to destroy the world. That easy dichotomy no longer works that well because of how embedded they are now with political activity. So they have their own representatives in the Knesset who are rabbis and who do the dirtiest politics around. So despite their best efforts, they're having a tremendous leadership crisis now about what their own attitudes are going to be about authority. And that's cutting under the very underpinnings of ultra-Orthodoxy itself. We have a couple.
But I'm also thinking about it not just in Israel, because remember I grew up in Lakewood, and there's this community that vote as a block with the rabbi tell them, and there's a total belief that the rabbi is guiding us right. And so there's a total division between secular and religious authority.
So that's possible a little bit more in America, where the Goyim run the show, and in Israel, that simple black and white dichotomy has broken down because the Jews run the show. And that brings me to the last point, and we have just a couple of minutes, and that is one other way possibly to read this is to do who was it, the Tocqueville who said it about power and power corrupting, that this is one way of a kind of a non-cynical way of reading this, Adam, where he says, be careful when you go into positions of authority. don't delude yourself. There is this tendency that once you become a powerful, a holder of power, then all of your calculations that you think are being made for, you go in as a reformer, you go in as a person who's really shaking up the system, and then you become part of the system. And then you yourself become a person who's making calculations. Well, how am I going to hold on to power? If I don't hold on to power, then all the bad guys are going to have power. The world needs me. And then the compromises and the kinds of throwing people who need you under the bus kinds of decisions become a little bit easier, because, all right, it's a hard decision to make, but for the sake of the greater good that only I can accomplish, I'm going to have to do this. So that's a dark but not cynical way of looking at it, where he's saying not to the people who deal with the powers that be, but the people who in the end will be the powers that be. Watch it.
They can just blame the parliamentarian, I think.
Right. The person who writes the rules. So that's another way to read this Mishnah. Okay, we're gonna conclude for today. Like I said, next week we take a break because we have our wonderful program getting ready for Pesach, not Purim, and then we'll hopefully be able to reconvene the following Sunday. Okay, take care. Have a great
Thank
have a great
you.
couple of weeks.
Thank you, Shavuot Tov.